Hi, listeners. Just a reminder that all parties mentioned in this episode are innocent until proven guilty. Any opinions given belong to the hosts of Hoosier Case File. Any ads heard during this episode that are not in our voice are placed by third-party agencies. They should not be considered the opinion of or to be endorsed by Hoosier Case File. Welcome to Hoosier Case File, a podcast that delves into Indiana true crime cases. I'm Mary Quigley.
And I'm Rebecca Wilhelm.
We will be your guides into the tales that have baffled law enforcement and left communities in suspense.
From tranquil cornfields to bustling city streets, Indiana holds untold stories of crime and mystery. Join us as we navigate through the pages of the Hoosier Case File and bring you the stories that have long lingered in the shadows of the Hoosier State.
In each episode, we'll take you on a journey through the cases that continue to puzzle even the most seasoned investigators.
We will discuss the evidence, look at the leads, and invite you along as we speculate on possibilities surrounding these cases.
We will also shine the light on the solved crimes where justice prevailed and the pieces of the puzzle finally came together.
So true crime fans, come along with us as we pursue truth, both in the unsolved and the triumphs of justice.
Grab your cup of coffee as we navigate through the twists and turns of the Hoosier Case File.
Let the investigations begin.
The story we have for you today is about one of America's first female serial killers, Belle Gunness of LaPorte, Indiana.
Now, this is a case that has fascinated me for many years. Authorities know that Belle killed 14 people for sure.
But it was thought she may have killed 40 people, maybe even more, between 1884 to 1908. Her crimes occurred in Illinois and also Indiana.
In 1908, it was thought that she had died in a fire at her home, but the more that authorities looked into the case, that may not be the truth at all.
Something I find fascinating is that she may have just disappeared without a trace and escaped the fire.
Now, Belle is known by many nicknames. If you research the case, you will sometimes see her referred to as Hell's Belle.
I've seen her called the Black Widow.
I have also seen her called the Mistress of the Castle of Death.
And our favorite from the Chicago Tribune, which we used for the title of this episode, is the LaPorte Ghoul.
So let's go ahead and get into it.
So let's start from the beginning. According to the biography.com website, Belle was born Brynhild Paulsdatter Starseth on November 11th, 1859, in Selbu, Norway. Belle did not come from a rich family. Her father was a stonemason.
In 1881, Belle decides that she's had enough of life in Norway. So she makes a decision to head for the United States in search of, quote, wealth.
What's wild is her attempt of gaining wealth was not through the usual means of hard work.
No. In 1884, Belle married her first husband, Mads Albert Sorensen, in Chicago.
At some point, their candy store and home mysteriously burned down. The Sorensens collect the insurance money for both.
A short time after this, Mads dies from heart failure. Coincidentally, Mads passes on the one day that two of his life insurance policies overlapped.
Yes, according to a May 5th, 2018 New York Post article titled How a Farm Girl Became the Butcher of Lonely Men by Larry Getlin, Belle said that Mad had came home from work with a terrible headache. Belle had given him quinine powder, which was a common remedy at the time, and went to prepare dinner. When she returned to check on him, he was dead.
Now, according to that same New York Post article, Sorensen had a $2,000 life insurance policy set to expire, and he had taken out another policy for $3,000. Listeners, both of these policies were in effect for only one day, and that day was July the 20th, 1900, the day that Mad Sorensen passed away.
Well, that's really convenient for Belle, isn't it?
Oh, yeah, for sure.
Now, Mad's family was suspicious of this, but apparently no charges were filed and no inquest was made.
Later on, investigators found out that the couple had also had 2 children who passed in infancy. The biography.com website theorizes that Belle may have poisoned both of the babies in order to collect the life insurance money.
Yes, this became something she repeated later on, so it's not so much of a stretch to think that.
No, and if you think about that time period, babies passing away wasn't something that was uncommon.
So it would have gone unnoticed.
Now, something else that I thought was interesting is that $5,000 that she collected, that Belle collected in 1900, would be worth about $187,000 today.
With this money, Belle decides to purchase a 48-acre farm in LaPorte, Indiana, and start a new life.
Okay, so death and unluckiness starts to be something that seems to follow Belle.
According to the biography.com website, Belle remarries a man by the name of Peter Gunness and has an infant daughter from his first marriage.
Shortly after marrying Belle, though, this baby dies on the one day that Peter is out of the house for the afternoon.
Then Peter also passes away. Listeners, the way that Peter died is very crazy.
So according to the New York Post article, Peter is found one afternoon with his skull crushed in.
Belle claims that a meat grinder had fallen from a shelf and smashed his head. Of course, there is no way to disprove that this is what happened, so no charges filed.
Peter Gunness' death is ruled an accident.
The New York Post article states that Belle was looking for, quote, men to live on her farm for investment and possibly more.
And what's really wild to me is that this works for her, and men started replying to the ad.
Yes, this is crazy to think about.
So, according to the New York Post article, George Berry arrived from Illinois with $1,500 in cash. Christian Hilkvine sold his farm for $2,000 and brought it to LaPorte. Emil Tell also showed up with $2,000, while Ole Budsberg and John Moe came with $1,000 each.
What is really sad and scary is that none of these men were ever seen or heard from again once they arrived at the Gunness farm in LaPorte.
Well, Belle definitely had a certain type of man she looked for.
She sought out men who were lonely and who had a little money.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, even someone who only had $1,000 to their name back then, that would be equivalent to $37,000 today.
I think she also looked for men who may not be missed, meaning they didn't really have a family to come looking for them.
I agree, Mary, and I think the promise of what they believed was a good old-fashioned woman who could cook a great meal, had this 48-acre farm, that would be very appealing to a man who wanted a family and longed for a home life.
These men had no idea they were traveling to LaPorte, Indiana to meet a woman we would be referring to as the LaPorte Ghoul.
Now, in 1907, Belle hires this handyman who's named Ray Lamphere to help her with chores around the farm.
Not surprisingly, Belle and Ray become lovers.
But then in 1908, a man that Belle had been writing to arrives at the LaPorte, Indiana farm thinking that he is in a long-distance relationship with Belle.
This strange man's arrival is the beginning of the end of Belle Gunness' crimes. We will be back after a short break to discuss this love triangle. We are back.
So let's get into this love triangle that begins to be the unraveling of Belle's schemes.
Okay, so I'm going to read from Larry Getlin's New York Post article. Quote, in 1906, 49-year-old Andrew Hegelin answered a personal ad in Norwegian language newspaper called the Minneapolis Tidende. The ad was placed by 46-year-old Belle Gunness, who sought a partner in her LaPorte, Indiana farm. According to the ad, Gunness was seeking an investor who could potentially become something more, end quote.
So that is just a little bit creepy, and it just sounds crazy.
I guess this was an early form of Tinder, or what we would call a dating site today, just in the newspaper.
Yes. Mary, I think that's a great way to explain it.
So for 18 months, Belle and Andrew Helgeline exchanged letters back and forth.
And listeners, these letters survive today, and there's something else.
The New York Post has some of the letters printed. In one of her letters, she wrote to Andrew, quote, "We shall be so happy once you get here."
Oh, yeah. And in another letter, she tells him, quote, "I place you higher in my affections than anyone on this earth," end quote. All of her letters profess this love for him and promise him that they can not only have a business together, but she's promising a life with him.
In all of her letters, she tells Andrew that he needs to come to America and bring all of his money and not tell anyone where he's going.
I mean, that's not suspicious at all.
So on January 3rd, 1908, Andrew Helgeline arrived in LaPorte, Indiana. On January 6th, he and Belle go to the bank where Helgeline cashes 3 certificates of deposit.
Okay, so this money was about $3,000 worth, which in today's money would be about $112,000. Helgeline was told that it would be sent in about 5 days, which seemed to make Belle become very agitated.
According to the New York Post article, Helgeline was okay with the check, but Belle demanded cash. The couple left the bank, and that was the last time anyone saw Andrew Helgeline ever again.
And Mary, I think that's so sad because Andrew is there thinking that he's getting ready to start this life with Belle, who is already in a relationship with Ray Lamphere.
Belle is interested in obtaining Andrew's money, so she ends her relationship with Ray Lamphere and kicks him out of the house.
Now, between January and April of 1908, Belle is involved with several different lawsuits involving Ray Lamphere, and then Ray Lamphere gets arrested several times for trespassing on the Gunness farm.
During this time, Belle also begins telling people around the fort that Ray had threatened her and her children.
Mysteriously, on April the 27th of 1908, Belle Gunness farmhouse burns to the ground.
3 of Belle Gunness's children were killed in the fire.
Now, strangely, they find a woman's torso in the rubble of the home, but it's without a head.
The obvious suspect is Ray Lamphere. Police arrest him, convinced that he is responsible for the fire and the deaths of Belle and her children.
So investigators go out to the Gunness farm with shovels to see if they can locate Belle's head.
Instead of finding Belle's head, they are horrified at what they do find.
On May 3rd, 1908, they discovered the body of Andrew Helgeline. Well, pieces of his body.
Yes, according to the New York Post article, there were many body parts found. The article describes it as, quote, "a jumble of putrefied body parts, naked torsos wrapped in burlap, heads, arms, and legs scattered around," end quote.
Sadly, the body parts found included Belle's adopted daughter, Jenny, on what would have become the girl's 18th birthday.
Belle's neighbors were shocked and horrified because they had been told that Jenny was sent to California to go to a school out there.
Naturally, this case ended up being a national sensation. Soon there were thousands of people embarking on LaPorte, Indiana, and the Gunness farm became what the New York Post article calls a, quote, well-traveled tourist attraction, end quote.
What I find really wild is that back in those days, people could just walk into a crime scene area.
I agree.
I mean, the New York Post article talks about vendors setting up and selling snacks at the farm.
So that's creepy. And there were a total of 12 bodies that were found on the Gunness farm. Can you imagine, Mary, come buy a thing of popcorn where this body was found?
No, not at all. The craziest part of this whole thing is that they don't know if the torso found in the rubble is actually Belle.
Yeah, they never really had a way back then to prove that it was her torso.
Some people believe that she escaped, and others think she was killed in the fire.
Something I find interesting is that Ray Lamphere was charged with arson, but they did not charge him with murder.
Which I find a little crazy because he could have been involved in some of this.
And I agree with you. I think it's very possible that Belle could have seduced or manipulated him into participating in some of this.
Ray Lamphere did die from tuberculosis about a year into his arson prison sentence.
So what happened to Belle?
I think that's a mystery we may never find out the answer to.
Join us next time as we discuss the murder of 22-year-old Pearl Bryan of Greencastle, Indiana, back in 1896.
This is a case that rocked the nation.
This case also has ties to a well-known bar down in Wilder, Kentucky that's been featured on a lot of ghost shows over the years.
Yes, Bobby Mackey's Music World in Wilder, Kentucky.
And this is a fascinating case that was solved, but it still has a mystery surrounding it.
What do you think happened to Belle Gunness? Is there a detail we missed? We would love to hear from you. Please send us an email to who'syourcasefile@gmail.com or reach out to us on social media. We may use it in a later episode. In the email, let us know if you wish to remain anonymous.
To see our source material, please visit our website, www.who'syourcasefile.com. Please find us and follow us on Facebook or on Instagram. Who's Your Case File is a Quigley Productions podcast.
Our theme song was written and recorded by Earl G. Wilhelm.
Stay safe, everyone.